10 years ago, I dated this guy, David. I don't talk much about David, only to my current partner and very close friends. Talking about him makes me nervous. When David and I met, I was only 17, and he was a post-secondary student in his early 20s. Being a near-homeless gay teenager dropout, with raging hormones, a complicated home life, and limited dating prospects, I jumped into a relationship with him. Our relationship progressed very rapidly, and I moved into his Toronto apartment after only a month of dating. I was young and inexperienced with relationships. David was a horrible guy, of course. In the beginning, it was great. We were in love, very much so, but after a few months, that began to change. One night after our first minor fight over laundry, I got a glimpse of how angry he could really get over a simple matter. That night, I had a dream in which he held a pillow against my face, smothering me until I asphyxiated. His facial expressions contorted in terrifying ways, morphing into the face of a demon. In hindsight, this dream was trying to tell me something. I should have trusted my instincts. 6 months into our relationship, he no longer hid these parts of himself. See, David has a bipolar disorder and ignored his diagnosis. In retrospect, I can confidently say he is a sociopath as well. As a teenager, I was not equipped to deal with this. He was incredibly manipulative, eventually keeping me away from my friends and family, especially male co-workers. He stole money from me and put his bills and debts in my name without my consent. He would gaslight me on the strangest things, trying to convince me I was a horrible person. He constantly accused me of cheating, almost daily by the end. He would fly off the handle suddenly. He was often physically violent as well. I can't exactly remember how long I continued in this relationship. It is a part of my life I try hard to forget, but it was around 2 years, maybe a little more. On my first attempt to leave him, he followed me. As I left during the night, I passed through a well-lit city park on my way to a friend's place. Before I knew it, I was on the ground with David on top of me, hands around my throat. Thankfully, a passerby came to my aid. Don't ask me why I didn't report him for any of this. I was very confused. I really thought he was going to kill me. I did not tell anyone about that night for years after. He attacked me once more shortly after I left him, when we bumped into each other at a party. I find out later that he had been cheating on me the entire time we were together with multiple people, including my best friend's straight boyfriend. Go figure. Fast forward a few years, I'm dating an awesome guy, and I'm working as a charity fundraiser collecting donations for nonprofits on busy Toronto streets. I get angry or strange emails and texts from David once in a while, always changing my number and email address when he finds them out. I never responded. I'm informed that he moved to Montreal. I spot him a few times a year stalking me, poking his head around from behind a street corner while I'm working through my window as he walks around my neighborhood trying to figure out which house I live in or around my work office building. It made me very anxious every time. Every so often, he tries to infiltrate whatever group of friends he can connect me to. I see him pop up in social media photos with friends I have recently hung out with, despite living in a different city. I don't know how he was finding out these things about my personal life. However, all of this slows down as time goes on. until a year or so passes with no sign of him, until I get an email last year saying that he wants to talk briefly about things that happened in our relationship. It's worded straightforwardly, not like the rants he used to send me, and I wonder if he wants to apologize. I don't respond, but I message a mutual friend whom I trust to find out how he is doing. My friend warns me that he still obsesses about me often, and that his mental health has declined, and they are no longer close friends because of it. He advises me never to speak to him again for both our sake. Out of morbid curiosity, I set up a fake Facebook account and creep his profile, sending me into a rabbit hole of links to his Tumblr and beyond. He is an artist now. I find a post with photos of one of his latest works, the creepiest zine I have ever seen. It depicted an extremely bloody scenario in a poem. I don't remember the poem exactly, but it was something about gruesomely murdering a boy who didn't love him back, describing the death in detail, and contending that he deserved it. I'm more than a little uneasy at this point. I'm actually scared. 6 years is more than enough time to get over your ex. This was obsession to an alarming level. I changed my email once more and asked our mutual friend to keep me updated if he ever decides to take a trip to my city. I also deleted my Facebook and most of my social media accounts, and I haven't seen any sign of him in over a year. I'm 27 now. I've worked through a lot of the issues that David let inside of me. Now I have a really kick-ass partner and a squishy cat. I'm a university student, and my life has been pretty rad. Still, I'm always expecting to get an email or to see him down the street. I sometimes wonder if this is over, or if anything will change when he tracks me down again. Maybe he's simply biding his time. So yeah, let's not meet again, stalker ex-boyfriend David, ever again. 15 years ago, I had the misfortune of meeting Dave. I was new to riding the bus, and when my first day came, I hopped on and took a seat towards the front. I didn't happen to know anyone on the route and sat by myself with headphones in, rocking some now classic Good Charlotte. Back then, I didn't get much attention from the opposite sex, but I could feel eyes burning into the back of my head. I turned a couple of times to look behind me, and that's when I saw Dave. He had light eyes, brown curly hair, and quickly looked away every time I caught him staring. This went on for about a week before he finally said something to me. He told me I had nice hair, and he liked my band t-shirts. He asked right off the bat if I would be his girlfriend. I said absolutely not. I did not even know him, and his creepy staring made me so uncomfortable. He brushed past my quick no and told me there was a newly instituted hug toll that needed to be paid before getting on and off of the bus. I stared at him as he blocked the center aisle and gave him a half-hearted, one-armed hug. I know. Why would you hug the guy when you felt like he was a creep? Well, I had pointed him out to a few people in school, and everyone I talked to said that he was the nicest person they had ever met, and just a bit of an odd duck. Back then, I was worried about hurting everyone's feelings or being seen as rude, so I went with it. I have brothers on the spectrum. Maybe he was too. Next thing I know, Dave had joined my photography classes. My after-school programs, I saw him around every corner, and in every hallway of the school. He started popping up from behind things to try and hug and tickle me. Meanwhile, everyone just kept going with the chorus of, "He's a super sweet guy," and just an odd duck bullshit. When I found out he was telling people I was his girlfriend, I knew I needed to put my foot down. It was around this time I became unwilling to pay the hug toll and feed his delusions. That's when things really took a turn. Suddenly, anonymous notes were popping up in my locker. Most of the notes said always and nothing else. Some had longer declarations of love, but the always ones got me the most. The simplicity of the message gave me chills. Always. I knew it. I knew it had to be Dave. My suspicions were confirmed when pictures of me began showing up along with the notes. The pictures were all taken from a slight distance and clearly without my knowledge. They were black and white and developed on the same type of paper we used in photo class. I knew it had to be Dave. Who else would be doing this? I finally got scared one Saturday afternoon. As I was watching TV in my bed, I heard Dave's voice next to my bedroom window. He said he watched me walk home one day to see where I lived and wanted to stop by for a visit. He said he knew I wouldn't let him in, so he just figured he'd just stop by my window to talk. How he knew which window was mine was a thought that chilled me even more. The way this was escalating, I knew I needed to get an adult involved. My mom thought I was exaggerating. He was just young and infatuated and hormonal, according to her. She acknowledged the notes and the pictures as weird, but nothing other than some serious infatuation. So I went to an instructor at the school I knew and laid it all out on the table. Mr. K had also had Dave as a student and noticed some of his quirks and obsessive behavior and didn't doubt my story for a moment. He spoke to Dave's guidance counselor, and they both sat down with Dave, and I assumed told him he was making me uncomfortable and to stop. This pissed Dave right off. He stormed up to me in the lobby of the school with a glass rose in his hand and threw it at the wall behind me. It shattered, and he screamed in my face about how I had broken his heart. Just like the rose. A few teachers broke up the situation. A few days later, he dropped out of school, and I went 8 years without seeing Dave. 8 years later, I was craving some mac and cheese, as one does, and hit up a popular spot in town to grab some to go. I looked behind the counter, and there's Dave. I had no idea he was working there and debated leaving for a moment. I decided to stay in line to get my food. High school was so long ago. I hadn't heard from him since that day in the lobby. Surely this guy could not still have this obsession with me. It was a huge relief when another register opened and a young woman could take my order. I wondered if maybe he was even mortified and didn't want to interact with me and had her open. Wrong again. He seemed to take my visit to his work as a sign that I was ready to love him. At least, that's what I've been told since. I got a friend request from him that night and immediately deleted the request. A few nights later, I'm getting home and walking across the street when I see that someone is standing on the side of my house, opposite the door, in the shadows. I haul ass into the house, lock everything, and watch. It's so dark out. But I turn on the lamppost out front and hope to God I was just imagining things. Then I see him. He slinks from the side of the house, trying to stay in the shadows, and runs across the street and towards the house he grew up in. Unfortunately for him, I saw his stupid curly brown hair. I called the police and reported this, but of course, there wasn't much they could do. There was no proof he hadn't approached me or tried to get in. It couldn't be proven it was him. They did agree to keep someone on lookout in the area, and I saw police patrolling more than usual the following nights. Eventually the police patrol died down, and that's when the late-night knocking began. I could hear it softly on windows and occasionally on the door, but never dared to answer or get close enough to look. It wasn't every night, maybe 2 or 3 nights a week. The police never seemed to be close enough in the area when it happened to catch him. A couple of weeks after the knocking began, I received an envelope wedged into my screen door. It was full of the creepy, candid pictures from high school and another note that said always. I had enough and didn't know what to do. I went out to my car to drive everything down to the police. I don't care if I couldn't prove it was him. I just wanted to have some official record of what was happening to me. That's when I saw the word always carved into my back bumper. I lost it, breaking down in heavy sobs as I drove to the police station. Again, all they could do was take a report. But I decided on another course of action. In my rage, I took a picture of the police station sign and of the report being filed. I sent them to Dave over Facebook Messenger. I told him to leave me the hell alone, that the police were involved and he didn't want to ruin his life this way. He simply responded, "You're right," and disappeared. I have since heard he stalked a widow shortly after her husband had died, pounding on her windows and doors, trying to break in, until she screamed out of a top window that she was calling the police. I can only begin to imagine how she felt trying to grieve her husband and deal with Dave's obsessive ways. You may now find yourself wondering if the mac and cheese was worth it. The answer is no. Dave, let's not meet again. I was a sophomore and was seated next to a couple of seniors. This one guy, we'll call him David, sat directly next to me. He was a bit odd and wore a trench coat and black every day. Even if the sun was out, I dismissed it because I wasn't exactly normal either. One day upon entering class, my teacher announced it would be a free day to chat or do whatever. David sat next to me and a couple of other girls, and we were all bored, so we all engaged in conversation mostly about our interests and schoolwork. It was all fine until David pulled out his phone and asked us to look. The image displayed on the screen was his genitals. Some of the girls laughed, but I got up and told the teacher, which ended up with David in the office, and I requested a transfer of classes. Now it seems my story would be about David, but crazy enough, it's not. He was just the beginning. I was switched and was seated next to a somewhat attractive boy. We will call him Victor. Victor and I ended up having a lot in common, talked a lot in class. One day, walking to class, I saw him walking and talking with David. When we got in class, I asked Victor how he knew David, and he explained how David was his older brother. I told him what had happened, and he also explained how David wasn't exactly all there in the head, and apologized on his brother's behalf. Victor and I ended up being good friends at school, and eventually I invited him to hang out outside of school. We went to my house and hung out in my backyard. We never entered my house, nor did he know what room was mine. A few days had passed since we hung out, and then things got weird. I would be at home and I would notice him skating up and down my street. We were on a break, and this happened every day during the break, which had never happened before. I never went out to approach him because I would look out and see him slow down and try to look in my windows. It creeped me out, and me being paranoid, I decided against speaking to him. 3 days before break ended, there was a knock at my door. My dad answered, spoke briefly to the person, and shut the door. Apparently it was for me. Victor had dropped off a present. It was labeled Happy Birthday. My birthday wasn't for another 6 months. He began not to even knock, just dropped off these gifts on the doorstep. Every other day, all labeled the same thing, Happy Birthday. They weren't creepy gifts either. Some posters of my favorite bands, t-shirts, pens, etc. I started ignoring him in class, and he ended up switching. He would stare at me during lunch from across the school. It was an empty look. He started leaving me notes taped to my desk before class, saying he was sorry, and that he just wanted to be with me, close to me. They progressively got creepier. One morning I woke up for school and my dad called me outside. He looked irritated and worried. In huge chalk was my name written in front of my window with hearts and a gift. This gift contained, it looked like, a handmade doll. The clothes on the doll were old clothes I had thrown away, and my hair, which I had recently cut. He went through my trash to retrieve these items. The most disturbing part was a piece of a razor stuck in the doll's chest. It was soaked in a dark, dry red substance. We assumed it was his blood. My dad was furious and notified the school. How the skating in front of my window hadn't stopped. The gifts. After the most recent creepy doll gift, I told my dad about the letters and constant staring. There was a conference and I eventually stopped seeing Victor at school. My mom and dad are separated, which means my sister lives with my mom on the other side of the city, and she attends a different school. A few months ago, about 3. Later, my dad and I made a date to take my sister to lunch. We chatted and my sister told us about this cute guy she has been dating at school named Victor. How when he met her, it was like he already knew who she was. He told my sister she looked familiar, like maybe they were married in a past life. My sister, being younger and more naive, took this as adorable. My dad and I flipped out and told her everything. My sister is very badly tempered and thought we just wanted to ruin her life and demanded we take her home. My mom is just as bad and told us to stop antagonizing her. My dad and I dropped it off. My mom is just as bad and told us to stop antagonizing them. My dad and I just dropped it. After being accused of jealousy, about a week passed when my sister called me crying and apologizing. Apparently she had been to Victor's house. My sister's very nosy, and when Victor used the restroom, she noticed and read a journal on his desk, all filled with pictures of me, my name scribbled everywhere, blood-soaked pages, and bits of hair taped randomly. One of the entries was the day before, obsessing over me, saying my sister smelled like me. How this was the closest he'd ever be. She left unnoticed. Soon Victor just sort of disappeared. The last I heard of him and his brother attempted suicide together, and not much after that. So creepy high school stalker and your younger brother, let's not meet again. For anonymous's sake, I'm going to call my friend Blanche. We met during my sophomore year of university. When we ended up taking the same French courses, we hit it off really well, and we ended up going to our campus's French club events. We became best friends. But the thing was, the closer we got, the less I came to be like Blanche. I know it sounds weird, but she would tell me secrets, like how the thought of yellow cake turns her on, and what she would want said cake when she encountered it. I'll spare you the unpleasant details. She expressed these feelings with Asian cuisine as well, so things were really weird. Once we agreed to work on a group project, only for her to literally do nothing, she seemed oblivious as to why I was angry. But I digress. She began copying me in various ways, gestures, tone of voice, siding with my opinion on various topics when she didn't do so before. I ended up switching my major because I guess the upper level classes for my degree weren't in demand like the intro courses. I found out I could study abroad with this degree and applied for a scholarship, but the trip fell through due to low interest. Fortunately, I was allowed to use the money on another student abroad trip of my choice. Blanche suggested to me that I go on the same trip as her and one of our mutual peers. I figured I may as well, since we were still good on terms at this point. One thing you must remember, Blanche went on the study abroad trip before. This is important to know later. In the weeks leading up to the trip, Blanche insisted we drive to the location with the mutual pier I referenced earlier. I asked her what she had packed on her last trip, and she would lie about various aspects. For instance, I asked if we needed to pack cookware, and she insisted we did not need to, but then would say she regretted not doing so last time. It was just a weird thing to lie about. The day we depart arrives, and it's the day before Mother's Day. I had not studied abroad before, so I gave my mom a hug and let her know how to contact me in case of an emergency. As I gave my mom a hug, I see Blanche glaring at my mother. I tell myself I imagined it, and just pack my stuff into her older-than-dirt car. As we drive to pick up the mutual classmate, she tells me my mother threatened her when I was away. Now I know this is a lie, not just because my mother isn't a violent person, but I was with Blanche the whole time I was packing. If my mother made a threat, I would have heard it. I told her that she was a liar, and she just blew off my comment. So we pick up the mutual classmate, and he has a hard time hearing us up in the front seat. We try to keep him in the conversation, and he mentions he can't live without technology. I tease him and ask him, so what would happen if we just dumped you in the woods right here, where there's no Wi-Fi or signal? And he laughed and explained he'd be helpless. Blanche takes it one step further. Blanche asked how funny it would be if we just dumped him and we put him in the sex trade and traumatized him for life. Dead silence from us both, but she seemed oblivious. It was an awkward ride. We got to the hotel and I wake up hours before my classmates the next morning. As I mentioned earlier, it was Mother's Day, so I give my mom a call so she knows we made it all right. Halfway through the call, Blanche sends me a text demanding to know where I went. I hear her feet angrily pound against the ground as she approached, so I told my mom I'd call her back later and hang up. Time skipped to when we get to the campus. She immediately ditches me and the classmate to do her own thing, while we aimlessly try to figure out where to go. We had a meeting before to our apartments, but since the classmate and I weren't familiar with the campus, we could not find the building. Minutes before the meeting, Blanche texts me and asks me where we went, and the two of us skated into the meeting with minutes to spare. We caught up with Blanche, and she asked where we went. I explained my phone plan. I was only afforded up to so many texts and couldn't reply. I asked why she ditched us and didn't tell us where we were going. She then lies and says she had neither of our phone numbers, even though she had texted me 10 times prior. At this meeting, we had to pick up 3 classes of our choice for the program that aligned with our interest. I was tired of Blanche at this point, so when I saw her copying my answers, I would change them. When I saw her erase and copy my choices again, I reselected my classes and flipped the paper over. I just needed space from her. The 3 of us go shopping, and Blanche insists we pool our money so we have more spending power. It seemed logical, and since I discovered she lied about having cookware supplied for us, I wanted to buy pots and pans. She tells me there's no need. One of our roommates would loan us hers and suggest we spend 1/3 of our funds on wine. We bought a few frozen meals and pasta and returned to the apartment. I cooked dinner, and we have a ton of leftovers, which I pack up since no one said they wanted any. Blanche asks if she can have some of the leftovers, and I tell her, if we still have some on Friday, they're all yours. Not only were my leftovers gone before Friday, but so was all my food that I purchased for myself. I had no more money to go shopping. Blanche then tells my roommates one evening that I had a variety of weapons and was liberal with how I used them. I was horrified and embarrassed. Not only was this a lie, but she seemed to think my displeasure was amusing. She then goes on to tell my roommates she studies psychology, and my mother would frequently consult her for advice on her cases. She then casually suggests that we cook meth in the kitchen. I was horrified, and so were my roommates. I try to laugh it off like a joke, but Blanche is dead serious. I scold her and say that I'm not interested. My mind was made up at this point. We needed a new apartment. At first, the university thinks my request is foolish, to say the least, but when I mention meth, they immediately agree to find a new apartment. So I go back to my apartment to start packing. Blanche got the notice she was reported for potential drug use, and she's told I'm leaving the apartment. She pushes me into my room and blames one of our roommates for reporting her, and says that this report is why I'm being kicked out of the apartment. I try to convince her our roommate is innocent, but Blanche wasn't about to hear it. So she convinces both of our roommates to go to the main office and demand answers. I keep packing and wash a few loads of dirty clothes. As I climb the stairs back up to the apartment, I run into Blanche and the roommates who are consoling her. The main office told her I reported her. I really wish they had not, because they triggered a monster. Blanche starts violently staring me down, like she's ready to fight. I play it cool when this happens. I realize she owes me the money because she won't be giving me a ride home. I take the money and switch apartments. I thought this was the end, but I was way off the mark. This wasn't even the trip. This wasn't even the tip of the iceberg. Each week, the university had mandatory meetings in which they would take us on field trips of sorts for cultural immersion. Blanche would always sit in the meetings where I could see her and would stare at me for the duration of these meetings, with my roommates babying her like she was a scorned saint. At the end of each meeting, everyone had to sign up for a trip that we discussed at the meeting. Blanche would stand immediately behind me in lines and sign up for the same trips I would. This is not a crime in and of itself, but one of the trips, she would either stand immediately behind me or in my line of vision, glaring at me through her sunglasses. On one trip, I discovered the town had public Wi-Fi, so as long as you were in town limits, you could access the internet for free. So I caught up with a couple of friends during lunch. A mutual friend of ours let me know Blanche had been sending everyone in our social circles messages about how I tried to physically attack her, and he sent me the screenshots of what she had sent him. Just then, I get a text from the witch herself, Blanche. I look up from my phone and see she is standing immediately behind me with a roommate. Instead of talking to me verbally, she gestures towards her phone, indicating I should text back. I just tell her this: look, I can't text because, like I told you, I have a limited number of texts I can send. I am not going to waste them. Furthermore, I don't feel comfortable talking to you, especially not here. If you want to talk, we can do it at the university." I think we are on the same page, but not 5 minutes later, the mutual friend who sent me the screenshots updates me. Blanche immediately texts him saying I violently yelled at her and threatened her. I figured it's best to just never be in the same place as her, to avoid these accusations. So that's what I do. At the weekly meetings, I wait for her to sign up for something, so I can pick up something else. I ignored her, but one day, she followed me into the ladies' room and tried to grab me by my arm to talk. I narrowly avoid her grasp, but she tried to follow me to class. I told the university about this and they let my home university in on everything. I just wanted to let them know she was just following me around and trying to get me to engage with her. My host university ended up barring her from future trips because of the drug accusations. I'd like to say this was the end of it, but she tried to get me fired for reporting to work. That's a story in and of itself, so I won't share it here. A week ago, my mom called me and told me to check my LinkedIn account. It was a weird request, but she told me Blanche was spying on her LinkedIn account. Sure enough, Blanche was lurking on my account. We both blocked her, so I hope that's the end of it. Blanche, let's never meet again. Back in 2007, I was 16 and walking to the movies with an equally underage friend. This guy stopped us and started saying he's a psychology student and is doing research. He's in his 40s, tall, fat, not really fitting into a psychology student profile, but okay. We find it kind of weird, but pretend to believe in him. He asks if we can do some tests and say there will be prizes for completing these tests. We start to find it creepy. Then a homeless guy passes by and starts yelling at the guy, "Hey, I know you, you're a taxi driver." The guy ignores him and says he's going to call his friend to lead us to the test and go really far from us. By then, we're really creeped out and just start walking toward the movie, not looking back. Until a couple of years ago, I always thought of this story as the day I was almost kidnapped and murdered. Then in 2017, 10 years after my encounter, a girl posts a very similar story in a Facebook group of feminist girls in my city. She said she was leaving a party and there was this guy, really old, tall, fat, saying he's a psychology student and asking her to go do some tests. She was with a lot of friends and really drunk, so she thought it would be fun to accept it. Then he laid down on the floor and says she needs to step on him with anger, so she does. Then realizes he's really enjoying this and stops. A lot of girls start to reply to this post the exact same thing happened to them. He always says the exact same lines even. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, he asked to be stepped on, slapped, spitted, to be humiliated, and always get a creepy pleasure smile on his face whenever they do it. Fetishist pretending to be a psychology student for the last 10 years, let's not meet again. I play a lot of online games, and throughout the years, I have met weird ones, but this one takes the cake. Jake was recording for Twitch and got into a game with me and my friend Shay. We had won the match and played more. He seemed cool, so I sent him a friend request and we played more after that. He seemed very nice, if not timid. It wasn't too long after we started talking more. He confessed to being a sick kid and getting a Make-A-Wish from it. I felt bad and confessed I was also a sick kid and still sick now, but not to that level. And it felt nice to talk to someone who understands chronic illness. Because of mine, I started playing online less and didn't think too much of it. I got back on, and my message box was filled by Jake. I talked to him about it, and he claimed to be worried, and I told him not to worry because I had family and my boyfriend helping me when things got bad. As soon as I mentioned my boyfriend, he started getting passive-aggressive and saying things like, "A good boyfriend could take that pain away, you know." I brushed it off because my friend circle was kind of small and didn't want to lose anyone for small things. Less than a week after, he finds out he was in the hospital for suicide, and he called me from the hospital, which normally is understandable, but I had never given him my phone number. When I asked, he mulled over the question and went on how he couldn't live without me and could treat me better than my boyfriend. I asked again, but he continued how he was scared to be kept there, and how if I told him I'd be there, he would get better. In that moment, I promised I would be honest if he was honest on how he got my number. As you can imagine, that got him to talk. He had back-searched my username through Google and found my Tumblr because I had used the same name, then found my Facebook, then my mother's, and got my full name and looked it up, getting my number along with my address. I was stunned and hung up, blocking the number he'd called me with. I blocked him through everything but Facebook because I never knew his real name. All I can say is that I hope we never meet again.
Alright, if you enjoyed the video, go ahead, like, share, subscribe. Thank you for watching.